Umoja on Kenya Coalition, and the tweet says that my friend Raila Odinga moved to Tanzania for a human capital meeting to harmonize the expansion of employment opportunities in our continent. I am back tomorrow evening, and as you have always known, I am available to meet one-on-one with you anytime at your convenience. WSR is signing off as such. And Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, I see you with a smile. We understand that Raila Odinga is saying that there was an attempt by the president of Tanzania to come and mediate the two factions, but that was not to happen because President Ruto kept her waiting. How much of that do you know?
Thank you very much, Sam, for having us this evening. I, first of all, want to demystify the tweet from my boss, the president. Mm-hmm. What the president is communicating is that State House is a public place, of course paid for by the taxpayers. He's always open to listen to Kenyans of all walks of life, but he rarely encourages people to see him through brokerage. He's the president of all Kenyans. When you need to see your president, Raila Odinga knows where he can find him. In regards to the mediation, one, let me state some of the issues that we are looking at on our side. One is that the opposition have been purporting that the thuggish demonstrations that we saw were purportedly because of the high cost of living. The question we are asking the former Prime Minister is whether the said dialogue with the President of Tanzania was in regards to how Uga will come down, or was in regards to who gets what in terms of power sharing. And having said that, we have been very consistent, and I want to state very categorically now, from where I know and what I know from our side. We are willing to engage everyone, because Kenya is for all of us. But there is one sphere that we are not willing to enter into. And that sphere is the sphere that we have seen in the recent past after every election. After every election, we have seen the people who lose purporting to want to get into government through other ways. Kenya is a democracy. There is only one route into governing Kenya. And that route is in the constitution. And that route in a democracy like Kenya is through the ballot. Maandamano, dialogue is not a route to any kind of government. And therefore, we can talk about everything, whether about everything else, but we will never talk about power sharing. We will never talk about opening the decision that Kenyans boldly put forward in the August of last year.
Do you confirm that there was that purported preparation for a meeting, that Samia Suluhu, the president of Tanzania, was here, but the president didn't meet her?
From where I sit, we have not been anticipating any kind of dialogue in regards to the president meeting with the former Prime Minister and any kind of mediation. And therefore, I think that answer suffices.
No, I'm asking you a specific question. Do you know of any presence of President Suluhu Hassan in this country?
That you may have to ask the person who purported.
Diana Gishengo, so we're here. The former Prime Minister has made that claim. The President has said that ready to meet. Is this the path to a solution to the chaos that we've witnessed in this country the past few weeks? What will it take?
Ultimately, the chaos we have seen in the last 2 weeks are unfortunate. And first, it is a welcome thing that this week we have seen, whether people have decided to pray or get back to their business, that there are no chaos. That is very, very welcome. Do we need a mediation when we have such contestations? Yes, we do. Whether it is by the president of Tanzania, I think our religious leaders had also written indicating that they are ready to ensure that Kenya remains a cohesive state. So the path of dialogue, conversations, is an eternal one. Is it the path to gaining power? There I agree with Honorable Ndindi. It is not. It is only the path to ensuring that we have a country that can be governed within the rule of law. The actions that we saw both from government in the last 2 weeks were definitely actions that had set aside the rule of law. We resorted to a police state, outright violence meted both by police and armed militia, all of whom we've not seen any arrests. Then we also saw demonstrations with people who were demonstrating and were armed. So it was no longer a peaceful protest. That is equally problematic, and accountability for such action must be sought at all levels. But but in closing, how do we get there? First, dialogue is only for truth, for the governance and the rule of law structures to kick in. Who are the two protagonists of this? The head of government, valid for now, in office, validly elected for the next 5 years, is the president. This other side, Azimio protest, were led by the former Right Honorable Raila Odinga as well. So those two people have their place in this Kenyan society. I have come to recognize that. I am in civil society. I keep wishing that this street can be left to us who have other grievances other than what was discussed in the last 2 weeks. I hope we can get to that. And you've seen we've agreed with Honorable Didi on a few things. Just to remind him, his bosses are my neighbors, the people of Kiharu. And not the other books. We recognize
all right. And Dr. Abraham Rugo, so he says that whatever conversation it is, it cannot be about power sharing, and that the meeting that is purported to have been called was not going to discuss the cost of living, or maybe the Finance Act overseen by President Samia Suluhu, which he refuses to, or he says he cannot confirm. So even if you're to have talks, what must our political class do to ensure that that process is successful, with or without the harder instances that may have been taken so far?
Thank you so much. One is that I want to confirm that we are at a time when there are critical grievances that Kenyans have. My worry is that perhaps the grievances that Kenyans have are not necessarily the ones the politicians are pursuing. Because the grievances for Kenyans have to do with, we have elected a government. We may not all agree that we elected, but the majority elected that government. And there's a president in place. He made a raft of promises, but quite a number are falling, by the way. And there's a huge cost of living issue, which is not unique to Kenya. It's happening across other countries. My concern is that for politicians, and Honorable Ndindi included, the discussion, which is now being drafted as a discussion on power sharing, I think he's confirming that, yes, the matter on the table is a power sharing. The other side is saying there is nothing. We don't want to share any power. He's saying we are not going to discuss any power sharing. Well, in essence, they are agreeing that they don't want to discuss any power sharing. But what exactly then should they be discussing, which is your question? It should be about how do we use the House of Parliament, which is the House of Representation, to push for proposals, because that's a space where they all sit. Even the committees, the mediation teams that were selected were all members of parliament, at least a majority. They have the space, and we have given ourselves a constitution. They have the space to be deliberating, and we'll be delving a bit more into the rest of this conversation. The space to be deliberating about how to deal with the cost of living for Kenyans, and how to to improve our education system, how to ensure that health system is working, agriculture services are being provided, and there is food for majority. For me, those are the issues. And to the extent that a conversation is happening, it must ensure that that is the direction we are going. And therefore, for me, I support dialogue to the extent that it creates a space to have a conversation. But I'm also cognizant that even with or without the maandamano, there are institutions of governance that we have elected for ourselves through the Constitution. And I'm worried that we are not using them, and they exist.
All right. And of course, also joining us this evening is Senator Okiya Omtatah, the Senator of Busia County. And of course, we had to talk about the public debt. But before we get to that, Senator, we are coming up with this question that we've seen the president tweeting and saying that he's ready to engage the former prime minister at any time at his convenience. We've seen the former prime minister saying that indeed the president kept President Suluhu waiting in a hotel in Mount Kenya region. If these talks are to happen, or if the president and the former prime minister are to meet, do you think the conversation will be about the Finance Act, the controversial one, and the cost of living, or it will be about something else, in which case, what exactly?
Well, I don't know what the meeting will be about. Maybe it will be about ceasefire talks or things like those. But I don't know what it will be about. But to me, I think it's important they meet. If they have to meet, let them meet. It's important they meet. It might address one aspect of the issues that we are grappling with, which is the political direction of this country, because the economy is in a very bad shape. When President Ruto took over power, I think the Kenya shilling exchanged against the Uganda shilling was 36 Uganda shillings to 1 Kenya shilling. Yesterday, I did some transaction at the Busia border, and I think the Kenya shilling was at around 20 shillings to the Uganda, 20 Uganda shillings to 1 Kenya shilling. So I've lost 16 points against Uganda. Why would Kenya be depreciating against Uganda? So when you compare yourself to the dollar, you may not understand whether the problem in Kenya is bad. Kenya is depreciating even against their neighbors. Mm-hmm. Even with them doing nothing and we doing all the wrong things, we are getting poorer than our neighbors. Our economy is shrinking. Investors are running away. And I think this idea of being on autopilot by the IMF is something that I hope when Raila, the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, former Prime Minister, and His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, Dr. President, when they meet, I would like the question of Article 1 of the Constitution to be primary, that the people are sovereign, and not the IMF, not the World Bank. Let us get our country back from these two institutions, and let us organize our finances accordingly.
Right.
I would like to see that on top of the agenda, that we get this country back away from the IMF and the World Bank and run our economy the way it is supposed to run, for the benefit of the people of Kenya, not for the benefits of multinational corporations. Mm-hmm. That's what I would like to see on the agenda. Others will just be details. Okay. Because unless we slay that animal called the IMF, the World Bank, right, controlling this economy, we are going nowhere. We're just going to go into a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. You remember when they took over the structural adjustment programs? The mess, we have never recovered from the mess the IMF and the World Bank visited on this country. And this time we looked them in the eye and told them to take a walk.
All right, I hear you.
And I hope that will be on the agenda if when Raila and Ruto meet.
All right, Senator, I hear you, and we'll be getting deeper into that in terms of the nationality of the debt that Kenya currently owes other institutions, but also the